both have the same curse technique, projection sorcery, and it's stated they actually get faster the longer they maintain the technique. Hey, what's up everybody? It's LeeLos, and today we're talking about why Yuji versus the disaster curses is obvious. Stay steady in pursuit of your dreams and goals. You're born to win, you're made for greatness, and I definitely believe in you guys. Keep up the great work each and every day. So Yuji versus the disaster curses is a battle between the main character of Jujutsu Kaisen versus 4 of the most powerful curses in the entire series. Today we're going to analyze every single one of their power-ups and abilities to explain overall who's more likely to win between Yuji and the disaster curses. So if you're not caught up with the manga, this is a spoiler warning because we'll cover things that aren't in the anime yet. So first we'll start with start of Shinjuku Yuji, then later in the video we'll talk about how end of Shinjuku Yuji would do against these curses. So Yuji at the start of Shinjuku already has scaling that's pretty insane. For example, Jogo is implied to be the fastest of the disaster curses. That's because he's the metric that Dagon uses for speed in Shibuya. Despite this, there's a real argument that Yuji scales above Jogo in speed even at the start of Shinjuku. That's because of some feats performed by Naobito in Cursed Naoya. The simplest way to put it, unstacked Naobito is faster than Jogo. Full speed Cursed Naoya is very likely even faster than Naobito. Then Maki is shown reacting to and landing attacks on this character, which implies some really interesting things for Yuji's speed scaling. So Naobito and Naoya both have the same curse technique, projection sorcery, and it's stated they actually get faster the longer they maintain the technique. This implies that Naobito was not at his max speed when he was blitzing Dagon. Despite this, even while Naobito might not have even been at his full speed, he's already stated to be faster than Jogo. Cursed Naoya is even a level faster than this. On top of projection sorcery, Cursed Naoya has the body of a cursed spirit that allows him to propel air and go even faster, and he's using a binding vow that allows him to handle this increased speed, making his max speed around 3 times faster. So there's a very strong possibility that Cursed Naoya is even faster than the max speed of Naobito, let alone the unstacked Naobito that was already faster than Jogo. Maki is then shown reacting to and landing attacks on this character who very likely scales above Jogo in speed, and then we get angry Yuji in the culling games, able to do combo attacks with this Maki. This feat from Yuji is genuinely insane. Maki is clearly the stronger of the two characters during this portion of the series, but Yuji is still able to do combo attacks with and somewhat keep up with this version of Maki even after she increases her speed. A safe medium ball interpretation of this scene is that Yuji is already showing some lower end relativity to a speed tier that's above Jogo. And again, this is just Yuji at the end of the Culling Games arc. Then Yuji trains for a month and gets considerably stronger than this by the start of Shinjuku. Sukuna states that Yuji's cursed energy reinforcement improved drastically, but it's debatable on whether or not Yuji got faster as well during this 1 month of training, but I would argue that he did get faster, and there's a few things that imply this throughout the series. In JJK 0, there's a scene where Yuta gets angry and Geto states, "Your body is coursing with cursed energy, an increase in physical ability, and your 5 senses highly tuned." Then almost immediately after this, Geto says he's gotten even faster. This implies that either cursed energy reinforcement improving or cursed energy output improving, or some combination of the two, leads to their speed increasing as well. Another thing that backs up this idea is that Yuta was able to match Yuji in running speed while holding a drawn sword before the beginning of the Culling Games. Yuta states that he's physically pretty weak without cursed energy. Meanwhile, Yuji is stronger than ever, and he's superhuman even without cursed energy. So Yuta matching Yuji in running speed while Yuta's not using cursed energy is actually impossible. The increase in speed that Yuta's displaying here is due to cursed energy in some way, shape, or form, and it's likely cursed energy reinforcement, because cursed energy reinforcement strengthens the body. So all that being said, by the end of the Culling Games, Yuji was already relative to a tier of speed that was above Jogo, the fastest disaster curse curse. Then he trains for a month straight and gets even faster than that. The honest truth is, Yuji at the very start of Shinjuku is very likely bullying every single one of the disaster curses, even just at the start of Shinjuku. Really, outside of a domain, pretty much none of them have a realistic chance at victory. Mahito legitimately might die in one punch. He has statements in Shibuya where he says if he makes a small mistake, he could die fighting against Yuji, even in Shibuya. But to be fair, this is a nerfed version of Mahito because a fraction of himself was fighting Nobara at the time. His transform state is much more durable, but it was still one-punched by a full-strength Black Flash from Yuji. And to be fair, Yuji and maybe even Mahito might have both been partially nerfed here due to all of the damage they had taken throughout the battle. We do know that damage lowers output, and Mahito states that Yuji's soul is at 10%, meanwhile his own soul is at 40%. But in this specific scene, it becomes more of a debatable thing. Basically, it's a question on the buffs that Yuji and Mahito gained from Black Flashes. Do you think those buffs outweigh the nerfs that they've received throughout the fight? And in complete honesty, this argument would benefit Yuji even more because Mahito can actually heal himself. Yuji in Shibuya doesn't have a way to heal yet, so there's a real chance that Yuji is more nerfed than Mahito is and is still one-shotting him with this crazy attack. But either way, even if you have a full power Mahito, Shinjuku Yuji has gained so much power and can damage his soul with his attacks. Yuji becomes a very bad matchup for Mahito. We'll talk about Jogo in a bit, but all the other disaster curses, if Yuji's fighting them one-on-one, they actually can't do anything unless they open their domain. He's just going to be blitzing them and beating them up. They really won't be able to do anything to start of Shinjuku Yuji. Shinjuku Yuji does not have Sukuna anymore, so Mahito could actually use his domain expansion on him now. In domain expansion, this really is their only chance of being able to really do anything to Yuji, and there's a few different possibilities on what could happen in a domain with start of Shinjuku Yuji against the disaster curses. So Yuji's simple domain is actually really powerful. It was able to last 99 seconds against Sukuna's domain expansion, something far more powerful than any of the disaster curses. But in general, simple domains are stated to only buy time against an actual domain. Eventually they will break, and the disaster curses have an insane amount of cursed energy, so they have an actual possibility of being able to outlast Yuji's simple domain if he just stands there and doesn't do anything, just hold simple domain, right? And that would really honestly be their only chance of victory against start of Shinjuku Yuji. But even that is not very likely. Other characters like Kusakabe, Yuki, and Gojo are all shown being able to use simple domain while moving around at the same time. I guess Gojo shouldn't really be counted because he can kind of just do anything, so it is debatable over whether or not Yuji can move around while using simple domain. Against Sukuna, he just stood there and didn't move at all while he maintained simple domain, so it's a debatable thing, right? If you think that Yuji can move while using simple domain, then domain expansion does not matter. He's going to blitz and beat up Mahito, Dagon, and Hanami within the domain and damage them enough to break their domain before Yuji's simple domain breaks. He's still just going to win anyway. Even if they have a domain buff, he's just going to outstat them and beat them up. If you don't think Yuji can move while using simple domain, then them last-ditch effort opening their domain expansion is their only viable win condition against Shinjuku Yuji at the start of Shinjuku. And keep in mind, there's still a real chance that Yuji would just kill them before they could even open it. Finally, there's a third option. Yuji uses simple domain and his simple domain falls apart, then he would have to fight while being hit with the sure hit. Against Mahito, in that case, Yuji would likely lose, but against Dagon, Yuji might still win even while being hit by the sure hit. We saw that Nanami and Naobito were able to withstand Dagon's sure hit for a full minute, and they scale considerably below Yuji in durability. To be fair though, they were against a nerfed version of the sure hit. Nanami was hit by 30% of it and Naobito was hit by 70%, but neither of them even have reverse curse technique and they still survived it for a minute. Yuji legitimately might just beat Dagon up while he's being hit by the sure hit and win anyway. Like even if you give Yuji the worst chances possible, he still has a real chance of winning against Dagon. But to be fair, it should be noted that Dagon's durability is actually pretty impressive because Toji hit him multiple times with Playful Cloud and it still didn't damage Dagon enough to break his domain. And it's implied that Playful Cloud allows people to go beyond the limits of their strength. The databook says it lets a sorcerer use their maximum strength, but for example, Maki wasn't able able to do anything against Hanami at first, but with Playful Cloud, she was able to send Hanami flying, which implies it let her go beyond the limits of her strength, and a similar thing happened with Dagon as well. But despite this, Dagon was able to withstand multiple hits from Toji's Playful Cloud. Even while Yuji is being hit by Dagon's sure hit for a full minute, that might be enough time for Yuji to break Dagon's domain by damaging Dagon. But to be fair to Dagon, that would be pretty challenging for Yuji. Seeing how Dagon was tough enough to withstand multiple Playful Cloud attacks from Toji and still not have his domain broken, so it would be tough for Yuji, but it is still a possibility. He would have to do more damage to him than Toji did with a couple Playful Cloud attacks, or just kill him within around a minute of time. Yuji might even last longer than a minute because he has reverse curse technique as well. But overall, it's just more likely Start of Shinjuku Yuji is going to cook these guys. And Hanami, we don't know what Hanami's sure hit is, so it's 50-50 on whether or not you think Yuji could withstand Hanami's sure hit long enough to damage Hanami enough to break the domain. It's more of a 50-50 because Hanami's sure hit is unknown. But overall, even at the start of Shinjuku, Yuji is far more likely to defeat any of those 3 disaster curses. Now let's talk about Yuji versus Jogo, then we'll move on to end of Shinjuku Yuji versus the disaster curses. So even though start of Shinjuku Yuji outscales Jogo in speed, Jogo himself is very powerful, but Jogo's biggest weakness is that he's kind of a glass cannon. It was stated he's less durable than Hanami. If Goodwill Yuji and Todo hit Jogo with the same black flashes and 1 Playful Cloud attack, that Jogo would have died. This is pretty crazy because the Playful Cloud attack from Todo scales relative to, if not slightly weaker than the black flash attack from Yuji, because Yuji actually destroyed Hanami's arm with one of his black flash attacks. So essentially it's like 9 black flash tier attacks from Yuji and Goodwill are enough to kill Jogo. So essentially 9 attacks relative to the strength of Goodwill Yuji black flashes, that's enough to kill Jogo. The databook states a black flash attack is 2.5 times stronger than a normal attack, meaning if Shinjuku Yuji is at least 2.5 times stronger than Goodwill Yuji, then that would mean Shinjuku Yuji could kill Jogo in like 8 or 9 punches. Jogo learns domain amplification, and statements in the databook make an argument that domain amplification might actually provide a defense buff or a buff similar to what domain expansions give, because it's stated that domain amplification is similar to wrapping yourself in your domain. And we also get this statement from Jogo in which he says if he wasn't using domain amplification, Gojo would have one-shot him. So that also implies that domain amplification might be buffing defense a bit. So Jogo's weakest stat is his defense, and him getting domain amplification might really help that, but still overall, Yuji is going to scale above him outside of a domain. Not to mention if Yuji hits him with any of his blood manipulation attacks, this would poison Jogo and nerf him. So outside of a domain, Yuji would be considerably more likely to defeat Jogo, even at the start of Shinjuku. And inside the domain, essentially the same rules apply. If Yuji is able to move while using simple domain, then Jogo's going to die. Yuji is likely going to damage Jogo enough to break his domain expansion and win the fight. But this would be the most challenging against Jogo, because Jogo on his own is already really strong, but give him a domain buff on top of that while Yuji is fighting under a simple domain, Jogo actually would have a real chance of actually beating Yuji here, even if Yuji can move while using simple domain. So start of Shinjuku Yuji versus Jogo is more of a 50-50. Outside of the domain, Jogo really doesn't have much of a chance at all, but inside of the domain, even if Yuji can move, Jogo has a chance of winning that fight with his domain buff. So this is more of a 50-50. It comes down to, is Yuji more likely to damage Jogo enough to break his domain? Or could Jogo with a domain buff keep his distance and zone Yuji out until the simple domain breaks and then kill him with the sure hit? This is more of a 50-50, but Jogo really does have a real chance of winning in a domain here. Outside the domain, Yuji's pretty much guaranteed going to win, but inside the domain, it's more of a 50-50. Now, end of Shinjuku Yuji, we can just be honest about it. The disaster curses really don't stand any chance at all. After awakening, Yuji's feats are really insane. There's a scene where Sukuna punches Yuji in the chest and hits him with slashes at the same time, and Yuji's unfazed by it it and then punches Sukuna into a wall. That's one of Yuji's most impressive feats, actually, in all of Jujutsu Kaisen. There's also a scene where he's hit by Sukuna's domain for a very short while and then regens from it and survives. His overall stats are just actually insane. But to be completely fair, Yuji is amped by his Black Flash when he's performing these feats, and every time he hits Sukuna, Sukuna is being massively nerfed. So it's not the same thing as Yuji fighting a full strength Sukuna by any means, but it's still really impressive that Yuji's able to do this to even a very small fraction of Sukuna. End of Shinjuku Yuji, there's a really good argument that he just one-shots Mahito with his dismantle that can target the soul. If Mahito manages to open his domain, Yuji's going to domain clash with him and then beat Mahito up and kill him before his domain's broken. And against Dagon and Hanami, the same thing's going to happen. He's going to be just absolutely bullying them outside the domain. If they open domains, he's going to clash with them and then just beat them up relentlessly until their domain breaks. The fact that Megami could clash with Dagon in any way, shape, or form at all, while Megami was kind of a fraud and didn't have any barrier techniques of any kind at this point in the series. Meanwhile, Yuji had actually strengthened his barrier techniques with Kusakabe. It heavily implies that Yuji at the very least can domain clash for a little while with the disaster curses. And then during that time, he would just pummel them to the point where they cannot maintain their domain anymore. Outside of the domain, none of them stand a chance. And inside the domain, Dagon, Hanami, and Mahito still stand absolutely no chance. Now, with Jogo, you could make an argument that if he domain clashes with Yuji, there is an argument about maybe a domain clash would favor Jogo. You can make an argument saying maybe Jogo could actually win a domain clash against Yuji. Maybe this could backfire, right? He should have more cursed energy than Yuji, and he has more experience with domain expansion. Maybe he would just be winning a domain clash. But as I was saying prior, the fact that fraud Megami was able to clash with Dagon despite being considerably weaker in all the categories needed to have a domain, garbage at barrier techniques, but was still able to clash with Dagon, who had really good barrier techniques, it implies that bare minimum Yuji's going to be able to clash with Jogo as well, and then this will give him time to beat Jogo up and fry him. Something that's different between this version of Yuji and start of Shinjuku Yuji is that in a domain, Yuji would also get a domain buff. It's going to be far worse now because Yuji gets a domain buff on top of his already crazy stats, and he's going to actually fry them. We don't know if Jogo would be able to use domain amplification inside of a domain like the way that Sukuna could. He might not have the talent for it, but even with that, Yuji's still going to absolutely pummel him. To be honest, you can make an argument that he would beat them all at the same time by the end of Shinjuku, because really Dagon, Hanami, and Mahito wouldn't really pose much of a threat to end of Shinjuku Yuji. Mahito's getting one shot, and Dagon and Hanami aren't really strong enough to do any serious damage to Yuji at that point in the series. It would low-key just be Jogo with some minor support from Hanami and Dagon. If end of Shinjuku Yuji were to fight them all at the same time, it would be an extreme difficulty fight, and the disaster curses might actually be able to pull off a victory. They would have some win conditions, especially if they went in there with a plan. I would argue if they went in there with a plan, they actually would defeat Yuji. But if they were to just jump end of Shinjuku Yuji at the end of the series, it's an extreme diff fight, but I would actually say Yuji is slightly more likely to win more times than not. Mahito would be a non-factor. Dagon and Hanami wouldn't really be able to do much serious damage outside of domain expansions. And then Jogo's getting pummeled in like a very short number of hits, maybe like 5 attacks, and it's enough to fold Jogo. So once Jogo goes down, Hanami and Dagon wouldn't really stand a chance. They're also getting blitzed. I guess another win condition they would have is what would happen if like all of them did domain expansion at the same time. We never really got to see what happens when multiple people clash domains at once. Yuta, Uro, and Ryu did that, but we didn't get to see like what actually happens. So maybe there's a win condition there, but honestly, as wild as it may sound, I would say Yuji would be slightly more likely to win even if all of them jumped him without a plan. But with a plan, they can beat Yuji. If all of them jump end of Shinjuku Yuji with a plan, they have a chance at actually beating him. Oh, one more thing. If you think that Yuji's attacks work like Soul Split Katana, and he can just do soul damage to everybody, then he low diffs them all. They're all getting immediately low diffed, even like start of Shinjuku Yuji would low diff them all. I usually view that as more of like a highball version of Yuji, or something that only Modulo Yuji can do. This is a debatable thing, because like Yuji is able to damage Mahito's soul, but he really doesn't perform this feat consistently against other people. He doesn't damage Chozo's soul, he doesn't damage Todo's soul, and then Sukuna says that Maki's Soul Split Katana attack felt different than Yuji's attacks, so it's a debatable thing. When he's fighting anyone other than Mahito or an incarnated sorcerer, it's a debatable thing on if he's actually able to damage their souls as well, in the same way that Soul Split Katana can. But if you think he can, and you think all of Yuji's attacks are like Soul Split Katana attacks, then yeah, start of Shinjuku Yuji is low diffing all of them. That's everything I wanted to say. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the views in the comments. Like and subscribe, and I'll see ya on the next one.